question, and it's going to go to Mr. Castella. What plans do you have to find more precinct captains and volunteers, and how do you plan on using them more effectively? And the reason you're the guy, you're the challenger, you're supposed to have better ideas than your opponents, so let's hear it.
What I intend to do is to build a means of communicating with the voters that we currently essentially don't have. And that's to communicate with the voters in their own time, at their convenience, using the internet, using social networking tools. If you were to look me up on Facebook, for example, you discover that I have 5,000 Facebook friends, the great majority of whom are conservatives, and many of whom are right here in Lake County. They're people who are political activists. There are people who are interested in politics. There are people who want to remain informed. And what I do on a very regular basis is find articles of interest that they might find interesting, and send them out to them. I write notes. I write a lot of short articles and push those out, so that each time I push one of those out, it has the potential to make 500,000 impressions. And that's what I'm trying to do, is build a networking opportunity both for the voters in Lake County and for the party, so that our committeemen have the tools available so that they can directly lobby our elected officials using internet tools like CapWiz, so that they can be far more effective at communicating with one another. Right now, there's only limited communication among the members of maybe individual townships, but countywide there's a much lower level of inter-committeeman communication. And it's that networking that builds the ability to build an organization. So that's what I'm going to try and do.
Dan, would you like to ask him about either the question? A question about either the question I asked him, or about his plan there?
Well, could I maybe just respond to the same question?
You could do that, sure.
Different approach. You know, I think Facebook and social networking are an interesting tool. I don't think they make a campaign. I don't think they stand alone. In fact, we just had a training session. Joe Weiss from the state party did some social networking. Unfortunately, the voter vault took up a lot of the time, and we'll probably have to do another training just on the social networking. And I think that's more of a component part. My view is more hands-on. As I said before, I'm involved in a lot of community organizations, between the Lions Club, you know, the Booster Club at the high school. I know all my principals at the high schools and the grade schools. I know the superintendent. And the way that I go about recruiting people is hands-on, get to meet them, build a relationship with them. And I think that's a lot better to actually have that hands-on touch than just to broadcast 5,000 Facebook friends. I do, you know, I do believe in communication, getting information. I send out emails. I use, you know, an email system, and I've got about 2,000 people in my network that I send out regular emails to, and as a source of information. I don't find a good response to people saying, I read your email, I want to be part of your club. I get a lot of response from, hey, I like that information, thanks for sending it, that's helpful. That's a component to building a relationship. That's not the end all of it. I think you have to have the personal contact, and that's more of what I've stressed instead of just broadcasting. You know, good quality contacts are better than, in my mind, than, you know, just a large amount of loose or meaningless contacts.
Okay, Don, do you have any question you'd like to ask Mr. Venturi?
Yeah, one of the things you said earlier was that you've tried to build a big tent.
Yeah.
I guess the experience that some of the people have had is that you've actually been kind of exclusionary at times, and have made it difficult for people to be active members of the Republican community here, particularly some of the organizations. Now, I recognize that some of those difficulties have been healed over the last couple of years, but you know, I'm always worried that this is going to crop up again, and that's been a concern for me. Would you address that?
Yeah, actually, when I took office 4 years ago, it was a pretty fractured party. There were a lot of groups that didn't get along. And I think we've made great strides in getting people to work together. I know Mr. True sitting here, 4 years ago there was a great amount of contention, and there may start to be some now that we're in the campaign season the next month, and I hope it doesn't digress to that. But I think we've gone a long way, and I think just the opposite. I've gone to great lengths to bring people in, and I think it's reflected in the fact that a lot of the groups that were not supporting me 4 years ago, or not supporting the Central Committee 4 years ago, are supporting it now.
Before you guys hit your next question, I'd just like to interject, because I know an awful lot of you are sitting there going, what is he talking about? There were some disagreements between the Republican Assembly and the regular organization, and they went at it with lawsuits and plenty of arguing, and that has been healed as far as I can tell for the most part. Exactly how healed it is always up to the principals, of course. But there's sometimes, and also they mentioned voter vault a little earlier ago. Voter vault is a way we rate each voter in the state. Whether we think they're Republican, Democrat, Independent, and how Republican or Democrat. And that's what Mr. Venturi was referring to about classes on voter vault. We don't have any votes stuck in any vault anywhere, in case anyone was thinking that was the case.
It's a software tool.
Yeah. Okay. Dan, it's your question.
Cindy has a question.
Go ahead, Cindy.
Just for further clarification of what you had just explained, who was feeling left out or not invited into the party, what was the general problem as far as saying nobody's under the tent or whatever?
I think there was, go ahead.
That should be done.
People were essentially disinvited from the Central Committee meetings. They were forced to leave. When they tried to speak, they were interrupted and told not to speak. Essentially, they were excluded. And I don't know that there was necessarily good cause for that. I think one of the problems we've had is that people frequently have been sort of marginalized or ostracized without good cause, and that has created some amount of friction. Now, there have been efforts on all sides, really, to try and work together, and I would be remiss if I said those efforts were unsuccessful, because I think they have been for the most part. But I believe they entailed an awful lot of reaching out from some of the groups that had been marginalized. That, and that's part and parcel of a bigger issue, and that's one that seems to be that in Illinois, and it's not unique to Lake County, there are a lot of people in the political establishment who have tried to marginalize grassroots conservative activists and really keep them from running for office. Or when they do run for office, they can almost bank on finding opponents, and usually it's one opponent after another. Like the example I would use is in the 59th House District, where a gentleman was recruited back in 08 to run, and he ran, and then he was unsuccessul in unseating an incumbent, which wasn't.
Don, could you use names when you get that gentleman so we know what we're talking about?
We're talking about Dan Segru in the 59th House District. So Dan, to his credit, and I was somewhat helpful in convincing him to run again. Ran again this time in 2010, and immediately an effort was made to recruit opponents for him in the primary that was initiated, I believe, by our chairman and others, maybe from the House Republican organization. I don't know how many candidates there were, 3 perhaps, and ultimately that ended yesterday when Dan won his primary by a margin of about 60% against 2 other opponents. So he will be the nominee in that district, and I believe that the party will rally behind him now, or certainly hope they will, because I believe he's a good candidate, and he's proven that he's a good campaigner, he works hard, he's got a good grasp of the issues, and I think he'll make an excellent representative.
Okay.